Healthcare workers settle COVID shot mandate for $10.3 million. And those are real US dollars, not our Canadian mini bucks. Let me read to you from the press release. It's a self-serving press release. Obviously, the law firm's pretty pleased with itself, but they do append an actual copy of the deal, and you can see that the health network has signed on to it. A deal is a deal. They're crying uncle and offering $10 million. Let me read from the press release. Today, Liberty Counsel, that's the name of this class action law firm, they're obviously interested in liberty issues, settled the nation's first class-wide lawsuit for healthcare workers over a COVID shot mandate for more than $10.3 million. The class action settlement against North Shore University Health System is on behalf of more than 500 current and former healthcare workers who were unlawfully discriminated against and denied religious exemptions from the COVID shot mandate. The agreed upon settlement was filed today in the Federal Northern District Court of Illinois, and that's that document I showed you, the Health Network's own signature on it. As a result of the payment, North Shore will pay $10,337,500 to compensate these healthcare employees who were victims of religious discrimination and who were punished for their religious beliefs against taking an injection associated with aborted fetal cells. Let me stop for a moment there. Some vaccines, some medicines are made using aborted fetal cells, as in they take the dead baby from an abortion and use those cells to do medical engineering from. And that offends some people, many people in fact, who believe that life is sacred and that aborting a baby and using their cells for medical profit is grossly unethical. That was one of the reasons that people made a religious exemption. There are other religious reasons you can think of for not wanting to take a vaccine, but using cells in some way that came from abortions is a powerful reason. Now, what I've just said to you is illegal to say under the terms of service of YouTube and other social media. If you say that vaccines are in any way associated with fetal cells, even the research of those vaccines associated with fetal cells, you will get your social media account struck out. You will get a strike, as they call it, and you could be suspended. Imagine that. The University Health System in Chicago just signed a $10 million settlement for violating the very right that YouTube and other social media companies says doesn't even exist, and if you claim it exists, you'll be silenced. Isn't that incredible? Let me keep reading. This is a historic first-of-its-kind class action settlement against a private employer who unlawfully denied hundreds of religious exemption requests to COVID-19 shots, and that's very important. Of course, there's certain constitutional rights that all of us have against our government, in Canada using our Charter of Rights, in the United States using their Bill of Rights, but this is against a private company. And I think every other private company that thought that they would join the Pfizer mob against their own employees, I think they should wake up and read this very carefully. The settlement must be approved by the Federal District Court. Employees of North Shore who were denied religious exemptions will receive notice of the settlement and will have an opportunity to comment, object, request to opt out, or submit a claim form for payment out of the settlement fund, all in accordance with deadlines that will be set by the court. As part of the settlement agreement, North Shore will also change its unlawful no religious accommodations policy to make it consistent with the law and to provide religious accommodations in every position across its numerous facilities. No position in any North Shore facility will be considered off limits to unvaccinated employees with approved religious exemptions. Isn't that incredible? They're being forced to do the right thing going forward by lawyers. I tell you, a lot of people mock lawyers, make fun of lawyers, but in this case, I think the lawyers fought for freedom and won. Let me keep going. In addition, employees who were terminated because of their religious refusal of the COVID shots will be eligible for rehire if they apply within 90 days of final settlement approval by the court, and they will retain their previous seniority level. You know, I had an anecdote that I was thinking about tweeting about when it happened, but I refrained because I didn't want to identify the person in question, but I was flying Air Canada the other day. And the lady at the gate, when I gave her my ID, she looked up at me and said, "Thank you." And I thought she was just saying thank you because I was giving her my ID. And I said, "No, thank you." She said, "No, I know who you are." And she talked briefly, we didn't talk long, about our stance on forced vaccines. And she said to me it was her first day back. I didn't talk to her in much depth. I was sort of startled by the whole thing. But if I understand her correctly, she has just been rehired. I think she said it was her first day back. She had just been rehired from Air Canada after having been sacked for not taking the jab. And I think Air Canada should have fought harder, but of course that was a federal rule. That was a Trudeau rule. And she's back at work, but imagine the pain and the financial and moral suffering she was through. I think we need class action lawsuits like the one I'm reading about. Let me get back to the press release. I'll read a little bit more from the press release, and then I'll tell you what's interesting here. In October 2021, Liberty Counsel sent a demand letter to North Shore on behalf of numerous healthcare workers who had sincere religious objections to North Shore's mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy. If North Shore had agreed then to follow the law and grant religious exemptions, the matter would have been quickly resolved, and it would have cost nothing. But when North Shore refused to follow the law and instead denied all religious exemption and accommodation requests for employees working in its facilities, Liberty Counsel filed a class action lawsuit along with a motion for a temporary restraining order and injunction. And then I'm going to quote from one of the senior members of this Liberty Counsel because he's taken a bit of a victory lap, but I think he makes some good points here. Here, take a listen. Liberty Counsel Vice President of Legal Affairs and Chief Litigation Counsel Horatio Mehet said, "We are very pleased with this historic $10 million settlement achieved in our class action lawsuit. The drastic policy change and substantial monetary relief required by the settlement will bring a strong measure of justice to North Shore's employees who were callously forced to choose between their conscience and their jobs." And here's my favorite line. I think this is the most important thing in this whole story. "This settlement should also serve as a strong warning to employers across the nation that they cannot refuse to accommodate those with sincere religious objections to forced vaccination mandates." I think that is a good point. How many companies, big or small, decided to go along with the mob? Said, well, everyone else is doing it. Well, Dr. Fauci says to do it. Well, Pfizer says to do it. Everyone else is doing it. We may as well be callous and bigoted too. I'd be worried if I was an American company that denied religious exemption. I would be very worried about this precedent. And, it sounds like I've never heard of this healthcare system before, but if they're making a $10 million payment and if they had 500 or so staff that were involved, it sounds like they're a very large institution. And my point for mentioning that is, you can imagine they had outstanding lawyers who worked very diligently and said, boss, we're going to lose this one, better pay. So if you're a smaller company, and I'd say most companies are smaller than this health system, you're going to say, well, if the big guy with the big lawyers and the big insurance policies thought it was a loser, how could I possibly win too? I'd better make amends. I'd better rehire. I'd better pay compensation too. What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.